They say Ned Stark was the most honorable man in Westeros. That's what we've all been told, isn't it? A man of loyalty, of truth, of duty. But what if he wasn't? What if everything Ned Stark said was a lie? You see, for years, the realm believed his silence was noble, that he carried secrets to protect others, that he died for honor. But the truth might be far more twisted than that, because honor can be a mask, and behind that mask, there might have been a man hiding more than just one secret. What if I told you that Jon Snow's parentage wasn't even the biggest lie he told? That's just the tip of the ice. There's a deeper truth buried under Winterfell's cold stone, one no raven ever carried, one no bard ever sang. A few years after Ned's death, a man from the Night's Watch deserted his post and was hunted down. But before he died, he told a wild tale to a barkeep in White Harbor. He said he found a letter tucked behind an old stone wall deep inside the library of Castle Black. A letter signed with the initials E.S., but written by Ned Stark's own hand. That letter, it didn't just talk about Jon. It spoke of a child long lost, a deal made in blood, a truth buried not for safety, but for power. And here's the strange part. That barkeep? He told the story once, then vanished the next day. His tavern burned to the ground. Nobody saw him again. Just gone, like a shadow before sunrise. Now here's what really stings the soul. We always thought Ned died to protect Jon Snow, that he lied to save a child from Robert Baratheon's wrath. That made him a hero in our eyes. But what if that was just the story he wanted remembered? What if Jon wasn't the reason? What if there was another reason Ned kept silent all those years? A reason that, if revealed, would have destroyed not just one family, but the entire North. You ever wonder why Benjen Stark, Ned's brother, never married, never had children, and chose the Night's Watch so early in life? Some say he was hiding too. Some say he knew the truth and chose silence. Even Catelyn Stark. Remember her hatred for Jon? What if that hate wasn't just about infidelity? What if she knew something darker? Because when secrets start from the very foundation, every stone placed after becomes crooked. And now, with the North in ruins and most of the Starks gone or broken, there's only one question that matters. Did Ned Stark die for honor, or did he die to make sure the lie was never told? The answer lies not in Jon Snow, but in the past. A past where Ned Stark may have spoken softly, but every word he said was carefully chosen, like a sword, hidden in plain sight. And now we must ask, if the most honorable man in Westeros was living a lie, then who was Ned Stark, really? Let's go back to the days before Robert sat on the Iron Throne, before the war, before the rebellion. Ned Stark wasn't always the quiet, noble lord of Winterfell. Once, he was just a second son, a brother to Brandon, the heir, a boy trying to be a man. And in those early days, when no one was watching, Ned made his first real betrayal. It started with a girl, not Lyanna, not a Shara Dane, a simple northern girl. Her name long forgotten by history, but not by the walls of Winterfell. She worked in the kitchens, they say, gentle, always singing to herself. One night when the castle was celebrating Brandon's betrothal, to Catelyn Tully, Ned found her alone in the Godswood. What happened that night? No one truly knows. But months later, she was gone, sent away with nothing but a single coin and a warning. She was with child, and Ned never spoke of her again. Benjen was the only one who noticed. He confronted Ned, asked him to take responsibility. But Ned said, "It's done. We move forward. That's not honor, that's silence. And silence is sometimes the most dangerous lie. Some say Benjen was never the same after that. That's why he left for the Wall. Not for duty, but to flee the weight of a truth he couldn't carry. The girl, rumors say she died in a storm, somewhere on the edge of the neck. Others say she gave birth to a boy, who now walks the north, unaware of his blood. And that's the thing. Ned Stark's first lie wasn't about a Targaryen prince. It wasn't about politics. It was about shame, about avoiding scandal, about keeping the Stark name clean. But secrets rot the soul. And that first lie, it began to fester. You know who else knew? Old Nan. She once said something strange to Arya in her stories. Even the quietest wolf has howled in the dark. Arya thought it was just a tale. Maybe it wasn't. And Catelyn, she found out, not during the early years, but later, after Jon arrived. She confronted Ned once, asked him straight, "Is he yours?" And Ned didn't say yes. But he didn't say no either. He only said, "You must never ask me that again." She thought he meant Jon, but maybe, just maybe, he was remembering someone else. So if this was Ned's first betrayal, what does that say about the rest of his story? What else did he bury beneath that cold face and quiet honor? Because when a man starts lying to protect his pride, it never stops at just one lie. It becomes a habit, a second skin, a way of life. And now, a new question begins to rise. If Ned Stark could abandon a child once, how many other truths did he abandon to stay honorable? You remember the Tower of Joy, don't you? That tall, lonely tower in the Dornish mountains. That's where the legend says Ned Stark fought Sir Arthur Dayne, where he found his sister Lyanna dying in a bed of blood, where he made a promise. That's the story, right? But what if the story is broken? What if the fight never happened the way it was told? A letter was found, torn at the edges, hidden in a ruined satchel that once belonged to Ashara Dayne's maid. The letter wasn't long, but it changed everything. It was written by Sir Arthur's younger sister, Lady Illyria Dayne, and in it she spoke of a secret pact between Ned Stark and Arthur Dayne. Yes, the Sword of the Morning, the man who should have killed Ned that day. But what if he didn't? What if they made a deal? Lady Illyria wrote, "My brother did not fall to the wolf. He chose the shadows so a different story could rise. One day it will consume them all." Let that sink in. What if Ned didn't kill Arthur Dayne? What if they planned that fight, staged it, so that Ned would return with a hero's tale, and Arthur would vanish from the world? Why? Because Lyanna's death wasn't just childbirth. She knew something so dangerous that it had to be erased from memory. Some whisper she helped Rhaegar fake his death, that Rhaegar never died at the Trident, that his body was never found. Only his armor, and Ned knew. He wasn't protecting Jon. He was protecting something else. Maybe a name, maybe a bloodline, or maybe a legacy that could destroy the realm if revealed. Think about it. Ned never spoke of the tower, never told Robert what happened, not even his own wife. He claimed honor, but never gave answers. Why? Because truth is heavier than a sword, and if it slipped into the wrong hands, everything would fall. But here's where it gets colder. If Arthur Dayne lived, where did he go? Who helped him hide? And is it possible he lived long enough to see Jon Snow grow? Some say a quiet man, skilled with a blade, lived near the ruins of Summerhall. Never spoke, never fought. Just watched, and waited. And if that's true, if Ned Stark built his legacy on a lie forged in the ashes of a fake death, then Jon Snow's parentage isn't the secret. It's the second secret. The real one? It's still out there, and someone Someone is about to dig it up, because secrets have a voice, and the dead remember. Let's talk about Catelyn Stark, the Lady of Winterfell. Proud, loyal, wounded. We remember her as the one who stood strong for her family, but inside her heart, there was a storm, and that storm started the day she was forced to marry Ned Stark. See, she was never meant to marry Ned. She was promised to Brandon, the elder Stark, the one with fire in his blood. When Brandon died, the marriage moved to Ned. Quick, quiet, political. She didn't love him, not at first, and Ned, he didn't love her either. There was someone else, a woman he met during Robert's rebellion. Some believe it was a Shara Dane. Others whisper it was a woman from the Vale. Either way, Catelyn found a letter once, buried inside Ned's travel bag. It had no name, but the words, they stung. It read, "I carry you with me, even here, in this cold castle. She sleeps beside me. But it is your voice I hear." Catelyn never spoke of it to him, but from that day on, her heart changed. She stopped trying to love him, stopped trying to be warm. And when Jon Snow arrived, a child she believed was born. Of that woman, her hatred grew. But it wasn't just about the child, it was about the lie. Catelyn once confessed something strange to Maester Luwin. One night when Robb had a fever, she sat by the boy's bed and whispered, "How do I trust a man who carries ghosts into my bed?" Maester Luwin wrote it in his private journal. That journal was found, years later, in the rubble of the burned Maester's tower. Now listen close. There's more. Catelyn tried to leave once, took a horse in the night, rode as far as the White Knife before Ned found her. She told him she couldn't stay in a house full of shadows, but Ned made her a deal. He said, "Stay, and I'll give you peace. Stay, and I will never speak her name again." She stayed, not for love, not for forgiveness, but for the children, for duty. And every day after, their marriage was a quiet battlefield. Words were weapons. Silence was armor. When she died at the Red Wedding, she died with questions in her mouth, secrets on her tongue. And the saddest part, she may have learned the truth before her last breath. Some say she saw something in the eyes of Roose Bolton, that he whispered something to her before he struck. Something like, "You chose the wrong." Stark to love. Now tell me, if the marriage that built the Stark line was founded on betrayal and silence, what kind of legacy did they really leave behind? Because if love was never real between Ned and Catelyn, then what else about their perfect image was a lie? You ever wonder why Jon Arryn died? They told us he got too close to a truth, that he started asking the wrong questions about the royal children, about the blonde hair and blue eyes that didn't belong. But what if that's not the full truth? What if Jon Arryn's death wasn't just a Lannister move? What if Ned Stark let it happen? Sounds hard to believe, right? But listen closely. Ned and Jon Arryn were close, like father and son. But during Robert's reign, something changed. Jon started asking questions, not just about the king's children, but about the rebellion itself, about Rhaegar, about Lyanna, about the Tower of Joy, and more importantly, about Ned's journey home. One night, a servant in the Red Keep, an old steward named Garrick, heard raised voices behind Jon Arryn's chamber doors. Ned and Jon were arguing. The servant couldn't make out everything, but he heard Jon say, "You told me it was a mercy, but now I know it was fear." Fear of what, and why would Jon, calm, wise Jon, speak like that to Ned? The next week, Jon Arryn fell sick. Quickly, unnaturally, the maester said poison. And Lisa said it was Cersei. But what if Ned suspected something and stayed silent? You see, silence is a choice, and sometimes it's a weapon. Ned didn't confront the queen. He didn't raise an alarm. He simply left Winterfell when summoned, walked into the Red Keep and stepped into a nest of vipers, without armor, without caution. Some say he was brave. Others say he was ready. Ready to die. Because maybe Ned knew that Jon's death had bought him time. Time to clean up old truths. Time to protect the lie he'd carried for nearly 2 decades. One of Jon Arryn's old ravens was recovered later by a maester, in the Vale. The bird never flew. It stayed in its cage. Inside the cage was a note, tied with a black thread. It read, "The boy is not the danger. The father was." And there it is. Jon was digging too deep. He wasn't trying to expose Cersei. He was trying to expose Ned, and that is a secret you don't survive. Now think about this. When Robert died, and Ned had the chance to name a new king, he chose truth. He wrote down Jon Snow's real name, or tried to. But maybe that was guilt talking. Maybe by then Ned had already sacrificed too many friends to his silence. Maybe Jon Arryn was one too many, and the man we thought died for honor? Maybe he lived too long in dishonor already. Because if you stand beside a man's death and say nothing, are you still innocent, or are you just better at lying than the rest? You know who really betrayed Ned Stark? Littlefinger. Petyr Baelish. We've all seen it. He turned the city against Ned, led him straight into Cersei's trap and smiled while doing it. But what if I told you it wasn't the first time they crossed paths in shadow? What if Littlefinger and Ned Stark weren't just strangers bound by politics? What if they shared a secret? From years before. Long before King's Landing. Long before the war. Back when Ned was in the Vale, being fostered by Jon Arryn. Petyr Baelish was there too, a low-born boy of a minor house. Ambitious, clever, dangerous, and once, Ned made a mistake. There was an incident in Gulltown. A noble girl, Lady Corone of House Harding, accused someone of compromising her. Her father demanded justice. The accused was a mystery, until whispers reached Jon Arryn's ears. They said it was Ned. Young, reckless, maybe drunk, maybe not. Jon was furious. His heir accused of dishonoring a high-born girl, it could ruin everything. But Petyr Baelish? He stepped in. He told Jon he was the one who'd been with her. Said it with a smile. Took the blame. Took the shame. The truth, Petyr was never with the girl, but he bought Ned his silence. And Ned owed him. That's why, years later, when he arrived at King's Landing, he listened to Petyr's counsel, even when his gut screamed otherwise, even when the smell of betrayal filled the halls. He still trusted him, not because he believed in Littlefinger's loyalty, but because he was trapped in an old debt. A shameful debt. And Petyr? He never forgot. He kept that memory like a dagger tucked in his sleeve, and when the time came, he used it. He lured Ned with half-truths, poisoned, promises, and fake support, told him he'd back him against the Lannisters, told him the City Watch would stand with him. And Ned believed, because deep down, he thought the boy who once saved his name still owed him loyalty. But Littlefinger was never loyal to anyone but himself. He let Ned walk into that throne room, unguarded. He let him speak his truth. And then he pulled the knife. Not out of hate, but out of habit. Because power always finds a way to cash old debts. And here's the cruel part. Some say Ned knew that in those last moments with chaos erupting and swords drawn, he looked at Petyr and understood. Not betrayal. Balance. The price for the silence he'd once accepted. So maybe Littlefinger didn't betray Ned at all. Maybe he just gave back what was loaned, and Ned, maybe he knew it had been coming, all along, Because the truth about old sins, they never stay buried. They grow teeth. And one day, they bite back. Jon Snow, the boy raised in Winterfell, the one who stood in the shadows, who always wondered why he never felt like he belonged. We were told Ned Stark was protecting him, that Jon was a secret, a Targaryen hidden in a Stark cloak. But what if it wasn't protection? What if it was control? From the moment Jon arrived, he was treated different, not just by Catelyn, but by Ned himself. Cold, distant, always avoiding his questions. Jon once asked him, "Who is my mother?" And what did Ned say? "Next time we speak, I'll tell you about her." But that next time never came. And that silence? It wasn't mercy, it was strategy. Ned didn't want Jon searching. He didn't want Jon discovering what lay beneath the lie, because if Jon ever found out who he truly was, not just a Targaryen, but the child of a rebel prince and a Stark daughter, everything would fall apart. So instead, Ned made him feel like less, made him believe he was a mistake, an unwanted shadow. Why? Because if you keep someone low enough, long enough, they stop looking up. Jon went to the wall because he thought it was all he was good for, because Ned never showed him another way, never gave him the tools to rise. That wasn't protection. That was containment. And what about Ghost? That silent, red-eyed direwolf who followed Jon everywhere, never barked, never growled, just watched. Some say Ghost isn't just a direwolf. Some say he's a symbol, a part of old northern magic, a guardian, or a warning. There's an old tale in the north, not told in books, passed in whispers from wet nurse to child. It says, when the snow wolf walks alone, it walks to wake the dead truth. And maybe that's what Ghost was, a reminder that Jon's truth couldn't stay buried forever, because truth has claws. And when the dead rise, lies fall. And still, Ned held on. Even when he left for King's Landing, even when danger loomed all around, he didn't leave a letter for Jon. No message, no explanation. Nothing. Just silence. The same silence that raised Jon. The same silence that nearly broke him. But now, a letter lies in the hands of Samwell Tarly. A letter from the Citadel. Hidden, misplaced, forgotten. It speaks of Jon's true name, his blood, his right, but it also mentions another name, not Lyanna, not Rhaegar. A third name, someone else, written in Ned Stark's own hand. And if that name is real, then Jon's birth isn't just a secret, it's a weapon, one that could tear apart the Starks, the Targaryens, and the Seven Kingdoms, all because one man chose to lie and raise a son in silence. Arya Stark was never like the others. She didn't want dresses. She didn't care for songs. She wanted truth. Sharp, cold truth. The kind that cuts through lies like a blade through silk. After the war ended, after the Night King fell, Arya returned to Winterfell, not just as a Stark, but as something else, a facewalker, a truth seeker. But what she found in the broken halls of her childhood home wasn't peace. It was a riddle, a single torn page stuffed behind the old stone wall of the library tower, covered in dust, yellowed by time, Bran's handwriting. It was from before he became the three-eyed raven, just a boy then, curious, still asking questions. The note read, he promised, to tell Jon the truth, but he burned the first letter. Why write another unless the first said something else? Arya stared at it for hours. She knew Bran didn't write things for no reason, especially not back then, before his mind was open to all of time. She brought the page to Sansa. Sansa read it once, then folded it, tight, like it was poison. Don't dig, Arya, she said. Let the past stay buried. But Arya never listened well to fear. She went to the crypts, stared at her father's statue. She asked aloud, "Who were you really?" And that's when the memory came back, sharp and sudden. Years ago, when she was just a girl, she had found her father sitting alone with Maester Luwin, arguing in hushed voices. She remembered Luwin saying, "You swore to her, not to the realm." And her father's answer? "She made me choose, her or the crown. I chose silence." Who was she? Not Lyanna, not Catelyn, someone else, another woman, another secret. Arya now knew. Ned Stark didn't just hide Jon's mother. He may have hidden an entire bloodline, a second life. And if that's true, then Jon isn't the only child who's not who he seems. Someone else, maybe in the north, maybe far across the sea, could be carrying the same blood. Arya shared none of this with Sansa. Not yet, but that night she sharpened needle. She whispered to it, if he lied once, he could have lied twice, because Arya Stark was no longer a girl chasing honor. She was a woman chasing answers. And if those answers led to someone still living, someone born of Ned Stark's second betrayal, then blood would be spilled. Because lies are one thing. But a stolen name? That's a blade waiting to be used. And Arya? She's already reaching for the hilt. Bran Stark no longer dreams. He remembers. All of it. Past. Present. Moments not meant to be seen. Words never meant to be heard. Secrets whispered. In the dark. Now echo in his mind like thunder. When Arya gave him the page she found, something inside Bran shifted. He went quiet. Cold. He went back into the river of time, back to the Tower of Joy, back to Robert's rebellion. But not to the moments he had seen before. This time he looked deeper. He followed Ned Stark not just through the door, but into the silence that followed. And what Bran saw, it wasn't what we were told. Yes, Lyanna lay in that bed of blood. Yes, she begged Ned to protect her child, but that wasn't the end. Ned didn't weep. He didn't break. He looked calm, steady, and then he whispered something to a man in the shadows. Bran leaned closer through the vision. The man's face was hidden, but his voice? Familiar. A voice Bran had heard once, in the crypts of Winterfell, whispering to his father's statue, the voice of Benjen Stark. And Bran realized Benjen didn't vanish to the wall out of duty. He was placed there to protect the other truth. Because Jon Snow wasn't the only secret. There was another, a child never spoken of, a pact made in blood. Bran moved forward. He watched Ned and Benjen burn a letter. Then they made an oath. Not to the king, not to the gods, but to each other. If it ever comes out, the North falls. If they know who she really was, we lose everything. She. Not Lyanna. Someone else. Bran tried to see her face, tried to reach farther, but the weirwood resisted. It shuddered, and for the first time since he became the three-eyed raven, Bran was pushed out, thrown from the vision like a child cast from a tower. He awoke, trembling, and for the first time in years, Bran Stark cried, not because of pain, but because the man they all trusted, the man the realm called honorable, had lied. More than anyone else, Ned Stark had made peace with the lie. He wore it like armor, wrapped it around his family, raised his children beneath it, died for it. But the truth wasn't about Jon. It was about something darker, something older, and now Bran knew why the tree had pushed him back, because the truth he was chasing wasn't just about one man. It was about the whole North, and it was rotten. The Citadel holds many things. Scrolls, bones, secrets, and one of those secrets now rests in Samwell Tarly's hands, a dusty old letter, hidden behind a false wall, in a restricted section. Misfiled, forgotten, almost burned, it's sealed not with wax, but with an old stark sigil, faded and cracked. Inside, a single page, written in Ned Stark's hand, and it starts like this: "To the boy I called my son, though I never earned the right." Sam read it, twice, then a third time. His hands shook, his breath caught, because this letter wasn't the one they expected. It wasn't just about Jon's real name, not about Rhaegar or Lyanna or even the war. It was a confession. Ned wrote it just days before his death. He knew time was short, he knew truth, once buried, grows wild. He wrote about Jon, yes, but also about another child, one who never made it to Winterfell, one he never claimed. He wrote about a deal he made at the Tower of Joy, a deal not with Rhaegar, but with someone darker, a faceless man, a spy, a killer, sent not by Targaryens, but by someone else entirely, someone from Essos, from Braavos. The deal was simple. Protect the child, kill the prince, and your name will live untouched. Ned agreed, not out of duty, out of fear, because the war wasn't just about thrones or love. It was about something buried, far deeper, an old truth tied to the first men, to the weirwoods, to something that still sleeps beneath the north. Ned chose silence to keep that thing hidden, and Jon was never the danger. He was the decoy. The real child, the real threat, was never raised, never named, just hidden. And Ned, he died not because of honor, but because he realized too late that lies can't stay buried forever. Sam gave Jon the letter, quietly, without a word. Jon read it in silence. His face didn't change, not at first, but when he reached the end, when he saw the name of the other child, the one Ned never raised, he dropped the page. Because it wasn't just a name, it was a Stark, a child of Winterfell, a sibling. Jon never knew, and possibly, a weapon born from something even older than dragons. There was one more thing in the envelope. A ring. Black iron, cold and simple. No house sigil, no crest, just a note. This belonged to the man who gave me the choice. If you find him, kill him. Jon didn't say anything. He burned the letter, watched it turn to ash. But the ring, he kept it, because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free, it buries you deeper. And now the last question remains. If Ned Stark died to protect a lie, who will die when the truth is finally revealed?